Get your ghetto hands off this bank's counter before we remove you the hard way. Officer Briggs's voice exploded through the lobby as he seized Ariana Holt by the ankles and yanked, dragging her across the marble until her fingertips scraped painfully against the tile. Her paperwork scattered in every direction, and Briggs crushed a page beneath his boot like it was worthless. "Women like you don't walk into real banks unless you're stealing," he sneered, loud enough for every customer to hear. Lorne chuckled behind him. "Want me to call maintenance? She's making a mess." Ariana didn't move. Neither officer noticed the gold FBI badge glinting inches from their boots. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The late morning sun streamed through Willowbrook Community Bank's tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Dr. Ariana Holt stepped through the revolving door, her heels clicking against the stone as she clutched a thick manila folder filled with financial documents. The lobby hummed with the quiet bustle of customers going about their morning transactions. Ariana smoothed her navy blazer and approached the counter, where Marissa Hale sat behind the thick glass partition. The teller's eyes darted nervously over Ariana's professional attire, lingering a moment too long on her dark skin. "Good morning," Ariana said, laying her folder on the counter. "I need to access some account records." Marissa's fingers twitched beneath the desk. Without a word, she pressed the hidden button, a silent alarm meant for robbery threats. Her face remained carefully blank as she responded, "Of course. Could you please wait a moment?" Unaware of the alert now racing through the building's security system, Ariana nodded and stepped to the side. She opened her folder, reviewing her carefully annotated documents. The numbers had kept her up late into the night, transaction patterns that didn't quite add up, transfers that disappeared into smoke. The bank's heavy doors burst open. 3 officers charged in, weapons drawn, their boots pounding against the marble. "Everybody down!" Officer Briggs bellowed, his face twisted with barely contained rage. Customers dropped to the ground, some crying out in shock. An elderly woman clutched her chest. A young mother pulled her child close, shielding his eyes. Ariana turned, hands starting to rise. "What's going—" Officer Briggs slammed into her from behind, driving her face first into a decorative glass display. The impact shattered the case, sending shards raining down. Sharp edges sliced into her forearm as she tried to break her fall. Blood began seeping into the sleeve of her white blouse. "Stop resisting!" Briggs shouted, though Ariana hadn't moved. His knee dug into her back, forcing the air from her lungs. Officer Lorne yanked her arms behind her, zip ties cutting deep into her wrists. The plastic straps bit so tight, her fingers began tingling immediately. "Shut up and stay down," he hissed in her ear. Officer Tully grabbed her ankles, his fingers bruising her skin through her stockings. Together with Briggs, they began dragging her across the lobby floor. Her cheek scraped against the cold marble. Her skirt rode up, exposing her legs as they pulled her like a rag doll. "Please," Ariana gasped, struggling to breathe with Briggs' weight still pressing down. "I haven't done anything." "I said shut up." Lorne twisted her bound arms, sending daggers of pain through her shoulders. All around, phones recorded the scene. Customers pressed against the walls, faces shocked and horrified. Some turned away. Others couldn't stop staring. The humiliation burned hotter than the cuts on her arm or the bruises forming on her legs. Her designer purse, a rare splurge she'd allowed herself after her last promotion, caught on a chair leg as they dragged her past. The bag toppled, spilling its contents across the floor. Lipstick, keys, wallet, phone scattering in every direction. And there, tumbling end over end across the marble, was her FBI badge. The gold shield spun like a coin before coming to rest, face up, at the feet of the bank manager who had just emerged from his office to investigate the commotion. The badge gleamed under the morning light streaming through the windows. The lobby fell completely silent except for Ariana's ragged breathing and the soft whimpers of frightened customers. Stillness settled over the scene like a heavy blanket. Officer Briggs's grip on her loosened slightly. Officer Lorne's hands began trembling against her bound wrists. Officer Tully dropped her ankles as if they'd suddenly turned white-hot. The bank manager stared down at the badge, his face draining of color. His expensive leather shoes took a stumbling step backward, as if trying to distance himself from the damning piece of metal at his feet. Blood trickled down Ariana's arm, dripping onto the immaculate floor. Her chest heaved against the marble as she fought to catch her breath. Phones continued recording, capturing every excruciating second of the tableau. The three officers frozen in place, the scattered contents of her purse, her torn clothing, and the unmistakable federal badge that had just changed everything. Ariana turned her head slowly, meeting Officer Briggs's eyes. Despite the pain radiating through her body and the burning shame of being dragged across the floor like a criminal, her voice came out steady and clear. "You just committed a federal crime." The words echoed in the silent lobby. A child somewhere began to cry. The elderly woman who had clutched her chest earlier let out a choked sob. Someone's phone camera clicked rapidly, preserving image after image of the scene. Officer Tully's hand moved toward his weapon, then dropped away. Officer Lorne's breathing became rapid and shallow behind her. Officer Briggs remained frozen, his face a mask of dawning horror as the full implications of their actions began to sink in. The manager's expensive shoes appeared in Ariana's line of sight as he finally approached. His hand shook as he bent to retrieve the badge, holding it as if it might explode. The morning sun caught the gold shield, sending a bright reflection dancing across the marble floor, across the drops of blood, across the scattered contents of her purse, across the faces of the officers who had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. The bank lobby remained frozen in shocked silence. Using the wall for support, Ariana pulled herself up from the cold marble floor, her legs shaking beneath her. Blood from the cuts on her arm had soaked through her white blouse sleeve, turning it a dark crimson. Her wrists still burned from the zip ties, angry red marks visible where they had cut into her skin. "Let her go! What's wrong with you?" An elderly woman shouted, her voice trembling with anger. Other customers joined in, their phones still recording as they hurled accusations at the officers. "Police brutality! She's FBI! We saw everything! You're going to jail for this!" Officer Tully's face had gone ghost white as he stared at the badge in Carlton Reed's trembling hands. Officer Lorne kept opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water, no words coming out. Officer Briggs stood rooted to the spot, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead despite the bank's cool air conditioning. Carlton Reed rushed over to Officer Briggs, his expensive shoes clicking rapidly against the marble. He grabbed Briggs's arm and pulled him close, whispering urgently in his ear. Though Carlton tried to keep his voice down, his panic made the words carry across the quiet lobby. "This wasn't part of the plan," Carlton hissed. "What do we do now?" Briggs shook his head frantically, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. His next words fell from his lips like stones. "She wasn't supposed to be here today." The statement hit Ariana like a physical blow. Her analytical mind immediately processed the implications. This wasn't a random incident of profiling. They had been expecting her, just not today. Someone had been tracking her movements, planning this confrontation. "Remove these restraints immediately," Ariana commanded, her voice hard as steel despite her racing heart. "You're in violation of multiple federal statutes, including Title 18, Section 111, assaulting a federal officer, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, Would you like me to continue? Officer Lorne fumbled with a knife, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it as he cut through the zip ties. The plastic fell away, blood rushing painfully back into Ariana's fingers. Carlton Reed stepped forward, wringing his hands. His usual pompous demeanor had crumbled, replaced by barely concealed terror. Dr. Holt, please accept our sincerest apologies for this terrible misunderstanding. If we had known— Save it, Ariana cut him off. There was no misunderstanding here. You knew exactly what you were doing. She fixed him with a steady gaze, noting how he couldn't meet her eyes. Every second of this assault is documented. Every word you've spoken is recorded. And that slip about me not supposed to be here today. We'll be discussing that in detail very soon. She knelt carefully, gathering her scattered belongings from the floor. Her hands wanted to shake, but she forced them steady, refusing to show weakness. One by one, she collected her things: keys, phone, wallet, lipstick, aware of every eye in the lobby still watching. The teen who had been recording everything gave her a silent nod of support. "Your badge, ma'am," Carlton said weakly, holding it out to her like a peace offering. Ariana took it without acknowledging him, tucking it securely in her blazer pocket. The gold shield felt heavier than usual against her chest. She retrieved her purse and the folder of financial documents, noting that several pages had been bent in the scuffle. Walking toward the exit, she kept her head high despite the pain radiating through her body. The elderly woman who had shouted in her defense reached out and squeezed her hand as she passed. A young mother mouthed, "I'm so sorry," while clutching her child close. Just before she reached the revolving door, someone brushed past her. A woman in a gray coat moved so smoothly that Ariana almost missed the movement of her hand. But years of training had honed her awareness. She felt the slight pressure as something was slipped into her coat pocket. Ariana didn't break stride or turn around. She pushed through the revolving door and walked steadily to her car, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes watching through the bank's windows. Only when she was safely inside her vehicle did she allow her composure to crack slightly. Her hands trembled as she pulled the folded paper from her pocket. The note was written in neat, precise handwriting on plain white paper. No watermark, no distinguishing features. 7 words that confirmed her worst suspicions. If you want to live, stop following the money. They're watching you. Ariana stared at the words, her analytical mind already breaking down the implications. The threat was clear, but also revealed crucial information. Her financial investigation had struck a nerve. Someone powerful enough to coordinate with local law enforcement was worried about what she might find. And they had been watching her movements closely enough to plan today's assault, even if she had arrived on an unexpected day. She touched her sleeve where the blood had dried, wincing at the sting of the cuts beneath. Her back ached where Briggs had driven his knee into it. The humiliation of being dragged across the floor burned fresh in her mind. But rather than fear, she felt a cold anger crystallizing in her chest. Taking a deep breath, Ariana started her car. The engine hummed to life as she pointed the vehicle toward FBI headquarters. Her phone sat on the passenger seat, still automatically uploading the photos and videos that witnesses had already started sending her. The evidence was secure. The pieces were falling into place. Those responsible had tried to intimidate her with violence and threats. Instead, they had just confirmed she was on the right track. Something bigger than simple money laundering was happening at Willowbrook Community Bank, and she was going to expose every last person involved. The J. Edgar Hoover building loomed against the morning sky as Ariana pulled into her assigned parking space. Her body protested with each movement as she stepped out of the car. The cuts on her arm had stopped bleeding, but her white blouse was ruined, crimson stains telling the story of the assault. Purple bruises were already forming where Officer Briggs had pinned her down. Walking through security, Ariana noticed how other agents stared at her disheveled appearance. The normally pristine analyst looked like she'd been through a war zone. In a way, she had. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished floor as she made her way to the Office of Professional Responsibility. "I need to file an immediate assault report," Ariana announced to Agent Sarah Martinez at the OPR desk. "I was attacked by 3 officers at Willowbrook Community Bank approximately 40 minutes ago." Martinez's eyes widened at Ariana's appearance. "Dr. Holt, are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" "The report first," Ariana insisted, her training kicking in. "Document everything. Establish the timeline. Secure the evidence. I'll also need immediate access to the bank's security footage before it mysteriously disappears." Martinez pulled up the assault report form on her computer. "Of course. Let me just—" Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the message and frowned. "I'm sorry, Dr. Holt. Deputy Director Daltrey wants to see you in his office immediately. The report needs to be filed now, while the details are fresh." He was very insistent. Priority override. Ariana's stomach tightened. Something felt wrong. She took the elevator to the executive floor, her reflection in the metallic doors showing dried blood and torn clothing. Not exactly proper attire for meeting with upper management, but they could hardly complain given the circumstances. Daltrey's secretary waved her straight in. The deputy director sat behind his massive desk, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his expensive suit immaculate. He didn't look up from the file he was reading. "Sit down, Dr. Holt." Ariana remained standing. "Sir, I need to report a serious incident." "I said sit." His tone left no room for argument. She lowered herself into one of the leather chairs, wincing as her bruised back made contact. "Explain your presence at Willowbrook Community Bank this morning," Daltrey said, still not looking at her. "I was following up on suspicious transfer patterns identified in case file 47892. Multiple transactions suggesting that case was reassigned this morning." Now he did look up, his steel-gray eyes cold. "You had no authority to be there." "Reassigned?" Ariana's mind raced. "I received no notification. The case was actively assigned to me as of last night when I was preparing." "Check your emails." He slid his tablet across the desk. Ariana picked it up, scrolling through her inbox. There it was, a case reassignment notice time-stamped 7:43 a.m. But something was off about the formatting. "This is impossible," she said. "I was already en route to the bank when this was supposedly sent, and the routing header—" "Are you suggesting official FBI documentation has been falsified?" Daltrey's voice carried a warning. "Someone altered the logs. If you check the system timestamps—" "I've seen enough." Daltrey stood, towering over her. "Your unauthorized presence compromised an ongoing investigation. You're suspended effective immediately, pending review for misconduct." The words hit her like another body slam. Misconduct? I was assaulted by police officers working in conjunction with bank personnel. They admitted they were expecting me on a different day. This was a coordinated— "Badge and weapon," Daltrey interrupted. "Now, sir, with all due respect, that wasn't a request, Dr. Holt." He held out his hand. "Badge and weapon." With trembling fingers, Ariana unclipped her holster and badge. The gold shield she'd earned through years of dedicated service felt impossibly heavy as she placed it in Daltrey's waiting palm. "You'll be notified when the review board convenes," he said, dropping her credentials into his desk drawer. "Until then, you're barred from accessing any FBI facilities or systems. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." She stood carefully, her analytical mind already documenting every detail of this interaction. "Will that be all?" "One more thing." His lips curved in what might have been a smile, but held no warmth. "Don't bother trying to access case files remotely." Your credentials have been suspended across all systems. Ariana walked out with her head high, but her heart pounding. In the elevator, she tried logging into the FBI database on her phone. Access denied. She tried the evidence management system. Locked out. Even her basic email account was blocked. The speed of the lockout was unprecedented. Standard suspension protocols took hours to propagate through all systems. This had been prepared in advance. She passed through security, surrendering her building access card. The morning sun felt colder now as she stepped outside. Other agents hurried past, carefully avoiding eye contact. She was radioactive, marked as an internal affairs target to be avoided at all costs. Ariana reached into her pocket and withdrew the warning note, reading those 7 words again. If you want to live, stop following the money. The threat felt heavier now, more real. Her investigation had sparked this response, but from whom? And how high did it go? The coordinated police assault, the falsified records, the instant system lockout. Daltrey's clearly rehearsed performance. She could feel eyes on her as she stood there. Security cameras tracked her movements. Agents watched through windows. Her phone, though locked out of FBI systems, was undoubtedly being monitored. Through the late afternoon haze, Ariana's car wound its way through familiar streets, leading to her mother's modest 2-story home. The flower boxes Gloria meticulously maintained burst with purple petunias, a splash of color against weathered white siding. Ariana had always found peace here, even during the hardest times of her career. She pulled into the driveway, noticing her mother already waiting at the door. Gloria must have recognized the sound of her car engine. One look at Ariana's torn, blood-stained clothes, and Gloria's hand flew to her mouth. "Baby, what happened to you?" Gloria rushed forward, her nursing instincts taking over as she gently examined the cuts on Ariana's arm. "Let's go inside first, Mom." Ariana managed a weak smile. It's kind of a long story. In the kitchen, while Gloria insisted on properly cleaning and bandaging her wounds, Ariana recounted the morning's events. The bank, the assault, Daltrey's suspension, everything. Gloria's hands trembled as she applied antibiotic ointment to the deeper cuts. "They just attacked you? In broad daylight?" Gloria's voice cracked. "And now the FBI is punishing you instead of them? Something bigger is happening here." Ariana winced as her mother wrapped gauze around her forearm. "The officers knew I wasn't supposed to be there today. The bank manager practically ran to warn them when my badge fell out. This wasn't random. You think they were waiting for you? I think they were prepared for me. Different thing." Ariana pulled her laptop from her bag. "Mom, do you still have those old files I asked you to keep?" Gloria nodded, disappearing into the basement. She returned with a dusty external hard drive. "Your backup from last year's cases. You said to hide it somewhere safe." "Because I knew someday I might need files they thought were deleted." Ariana connected the drive, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "The bank's been on my radar before. Small irregularities I couldn't quite piece together." Gloria peered over her shoulder at spreadsheets filled with transaction records. "What are you looking for?" "Patterns. There. Look at these donations." Ariana pointed to a series of entries. Every month, large sums moving through shell companies into community outreach organizations. But when you trace the money backward, she pulled up another document. These organizations all have board members connected to local police unions or retired officers, and their donation records match perfectly with instances of brutality complaints being dropped. "They're buying protection?" Gloria sank into a kitchen chair. "More than that. The bank isn't just processing these transactions, they're facilitating them." Ariana opened another file. "Remember Carlton Reed, the manager? 3 years ago, he handled a fraud case I was investigating. Different bank then, but same pattern. money disappearing into fake accounts, then reappearing as charitable donations. She grabbed a legal pad and began writing. Carlton recognized me today. That's why he panicked. He knew my reputation for tracking financial crimes. The kitchen grew darker as afternoon faded into evening. Gloria made coffee while Ariana worked, her notes spreading across the table. Around 7, she started making calls. "Sarah, it's Ariana Holt." "Yes, from the Henderson fraud case." "Listen, I need to ask you something about Willowbrook's protocols." 2 hours and several conversations later, she had confirmation from former bank employees. Willowbrook had a system. Certain customers triggered automatic police notification. No robbery suspicion needed. Just their presence was enough. "Who were these certain customers?" Gloria asked, reading over Ariana's shoulder. "Mostly minorities with professional credentials. People who might notice irregularities. People who might ask questions." Ariana's pen moved faster. They weren't just profiling customers. They were screening for potential threats to their operation. She created a timeline, working backward from that morning. 7:43 a.m. Falsified case reassignment created 8:15 a.m. Arrived at bank 8:17 a.m. Police response, impossibly fast, 8:20 a.m. Assault and badge discovery, 8:25 a.m. Carlton's warning to officers, 9:03 a.m. System-wide FBI lockout, prepared in advance. The speed of everything. Ariana muttered, circling times. This was orchestrated. They had protocols in place, but they didn't expect me today, which means someone warned them you were investigating, Gloria finished. Someone high enough to access your cases. Ariana nodded grimly. And high enough to erase them. She kept working as night settled in, Gloria occasionally bringing fresh coffee or forcing her to eat something. The pieces were there: donor lists, shell companies, laundered funds, coordinated police response, internal FBI interference. All she needed was the connection that tied them together. Past midnight, exhaustion finally overtook her. Gloria draped a blanket over her daughter, fast asleep on the living room couch, surrounded by papers and files. The laptop screen still glowed, displaying transaction records that pointed to corruption far deeper than either of them had imagined. Gloria gathered the scattered notes into neat piles, careful not to disturb their order. Her hands shook slightly as she turned off lights, leaving one lamp on near Ariana. In the soft glow, bruises stood out stark against her daughter's skin. Evidence of violence meant to silence her. But Gloria knew her daughter. Ariana would follow this trail wherever it led, no matter the cost. Like she always had, even as a child facing down schoolyard bullies twice her size. The truth mattered more than fear. Gloria settled into her favorite armchair, deciding to keep watch through the night. Whatever forces had tried to break her daughter today would find that Ariana Holt was not so easily broken, and she wouldn't face them alone. The first rays of dawn barely filtered through Gloria's living room windows when Ariana stirred on the couch. Papers crinkled beneath her as she shifted, her muscles stiff from sleeping in an awkward position. She blinked, trying to orient herself, when she noticed her mother's tense posture by the window. "Mom?" Ariana sat up, instantly alert. "What's wrong?" Gloria's fingers gripped the edge of the curtain, her knuckles white. "Police car. They've been sitting out there for 10 minutes." Ariana moved quietly to the window. Her stomach clenched as she recognized the 3 figures emerging from the patrol car. Officers Briggs, Lorne, and Tully. The same men who had dragged her across the bank floor yesterday. Heavy footsteps climbed the front porch steps. Gloria flinched at the aggressive pounding on the door. "Mrs. Holt!" Briggs's voice boomed through the wood. "Open up!" "Police department!" Ariana grabbed her mother's trembling hand. "Don't answer. They don't have a warrant." We just need to ask you some questions about your daughter's criminal impersonation of a federal agent, Lorne called out, his tone mockingly pleasant. Gloria's breath hitched. Criminal impersonation? But you're FBI. Was FBI, Ariana corrected grimly. They're trying to twist my suspension into something else. She straightened her shoulders. Stay here, Mom. Ariana, don't. But Ariana was already moving to the door, her anger burning away any lingering fear. She stepped onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind her to keep her mother safely inside. Officers, she said coldly. This is harassment. Briggs smirked, rocking back on his heels. Now, how's that? We're conducting a legitimate investigation into someone falsely claiming federal authority. Pretty serious crime. You know exactly who I am. Ariana held his gaze. You saw my badge yesterday, before you and your friends here assaulted me. Badge? Tully snickered. Don't remember seeing any real badge. Just some fake ID from a wannabe Fed who was causing a disturbance? That's not what the video evidence shows. Ariana kept her voice steady, despite her racing pulse. Videos can be altered, Lorne said softly. Just like badges can be faked. Just like case files can disappear. The threat in his words was unmistakable. Ariana's fingers curled into fists at her sides. Briggs stepped closer, using his height to loom over her. Way I heard it, you got suspended, stripped of that shiny badge you're so proud of. Now you're just another civilian making trouble where you shouldn't. Is that what this is about? Ariana didn't back away. Making sure I know my place? This is about giving you good advice. Briggs's eyes hardened. Drop the act. Stop digging into things that don't concern you, before something worse happens. A door creaked open across the street. Mrs. Patterson, Gloria's elderly neighbor, emerged onto her porch in a floral robe. Everything all right over there? Other neighbors, drawn by the commotion, began appearing in windows and doorways. Briggs stepped back, his threatening demeanor instantly replaced with a professional mask. Just following up on a complaint, ma'am, he called to Mrs. Patterson. We'll be on our way. He turned back to Ariana, speaking low enough that only she could hear. Remember what I said. Next time, won't be just a friendly visit. The officers retreated to their patrol car. Ariana watched them drive away, memorizing their unit number. Her hands were shaking when she went back inside. Gloria rushed to embrace her. I heard everything. Those monsters. They're scared, Ariana said, hugging her mother tight. They wouldn't be here if we weren't onto something big. She grabbed her phone, scrolling through contacts until she found the number she needed. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Ramsey Cole. It's Ariana. I need your help. A pause. I heard about yesterday. You okay? Not really. The officers who assaulted me just showed up at my mother's house. They're threatening to charge me with impersonating a federal agent. Jesus. Ramsey's tone sharpened. Where are you now? Mom's place. I've got files, financial records, transaction patterns, police funding irregularities. But after what just happened, you need somewhere secure to review everything, Ramsey finished. And backup copies where they can't disappear. Exactly. Can you meet me at Carson's Diner at 2? Back booth. Bring everything you've got. Ariana felt some of her tension ease. Ramsey had been her mentor when she first joined the Bureau, teaching her to trust her instincts about corruption. If anyone could help her make sense of this, it was him. Thanks, Ramsey. I'll see you then. She spent the next few hours organizing her notes and copying key files. Gloria hovered nearby, making breakfast neither of them could eat, jumping at every car that passed the house. You should stay with Janet for a few days, Ariana told her mother as she packed up her laptop. Just until I figure out what's happening. Gloria set her jaw stubbornly. I'm not leaving my home because some thugs with badges think they can intimidate us. Mom, please. They've already shown they'll target family. All the more reason for me to stay right here. Gloria squeezed her daughter's hand. I won't hide from bullies. You taught me that. Ariana hugged her mother fiercely, then gathered her materials and headed for her car. She checked the undercarriage and engine compartment before starting it. Paranoid, maybe, but necessary now. As she drove toward her meeting with Ramsey, she kept one eye on her mirrors, watching. Ariana made her fourth unnecessary turn, gripping the steering wheel tighter as the black SUV mirrored her movement 3 cars back. She'd first spotted it near her mother's house. Dark windows, government plates, maintaining a calculated distance. Her next turn took her past a bustling gas station. Perfect. She signaled and pulled in, parking near the convenience store entrance where foot traffic was heaviest. The SUV rolled past slowly, then circled back to park across the lot, engine idling. Ariana's phone buzzed. A text from Ramsey. Stay put. 2 minutes out. She kept her eyes on the SUV while pretending to check her makeup in the rearview mirror. 2 men inside, both wearing suits. Not local police. Something else. The driver spoke into what looked like a radio handset. A familiar silver sedan pulled up beside her. Ramsey Cole's weathered face appeared at her window. Get in, quick. Leave your car here. Ariana grabbed her laptop bag and files, then slid into Ramsey's passenger seat. He pulled out smoothly, taking a route that wound through side streets and strip mall parking lots. They're good, Ramsey said, checking his mirrors. But I'm better. Did this for 20 years before they pushed me out. I counted at least 4 turns they matched perfectly, Ariana said. Professional surveillance team? Has to be. Regular cops don't have those resources or training. Ramsey's expression was grim. Someone's spending serious money to watch you. They drove for another 15 minutes before pulling into a small diner on the outskirts of town. The parking lot was nearly empty, and the building's faded exterior had seen better days. Best pancakes in 3 counties, Ramsey said with a slight smile. And the owner owes me a favor. We won't be disturbed. Inside, a gray-haired waitress led them to a corner booth without being asked. She brought coffee without taking their order, then retreated behind the counter. Ariana spread her files across the table, talking in low tones as she explained everything. The bank incident, the suspension, the threatening visit to her mother's house. Ramsey listened intently, his lined face growing darker with each detail. This isn't random harassment, he said finally. The coordination between local police and FBI administration, the speed of your suspension, the deletion of internal files, that takes authority. High-level authority. But why? Ariana pushed a stack of financial records toward him. I was just following standard protocols on suspicious transfers. Nothing that should have triggered this kind of response. Ramsey began methodically reviewing her notes, his trained eye catching patterns she might have missed. These shell companies, see how they're layered? Professional money launderers use similar structures. But look here. He pointed to a recurring name. Meridian Consulting Group. Shows up in 6 different transaction chains, always connected to political campaign donations. Ariana leaned closer. I didn't catch that before. The amounts are spread out, different accounts each time, making it harder to spot the pattern. Ramsey pulled out a small notebook, jotting down dates and numbers. But add them up, and you're looking at millions flowing through that one shell corporation. All perfectly legal on paper. Until you realize it's the same money being cycled through different accounts, Ariana finished, making it look like multiple donations from different sources. Classic washing scheme. Ramsey's voice hardened. And someone powerful enough to coordinate police intimidation doesn't want you finding it. A truck rumbled past outside. Ariana glanced through the window, her breath catching as she spotted the black SUV parked across the street. They found us, she said quietly. Ramsey didn't turn around. Expected they would. Question is, which one of us? are they more interested in? We could split up, Ariana suggested. See who they follow. Risky, but it might tell us something useful. Ramsey gathered the files, sliding them back into her laptop bag. I'll head east on Marshall Street. You take Cedar toward downtown. Watch your mirrors. If they're pros, they might try to switch vehicles. They paid separately and left through different doors, several minutes apart. Ariana drove slowly at first, giving the SUV time to choose its target. In her rearview mirror, she saw Ramsey's sedan turn east as planned. The SUV pulled out, hesitated at the intersection, then swung in behind her car. Her hands tightened on the wheel. So they weren't interested in a retired agent. Just her. She took a series of random turns through residential neighborhoods, confirming what she already knew. The SUV stayed with her, maintaining that same professional distance. 3 cars back. Always 3 cars back. The surveillance was a message in itself. They wanted her to know she was being watched. Wanted her to feel the pressure of constant observation. Wanted her to understand that nowhere was truly safe. But they had miscalculated. Instead of feeling intimidated, Ariana felt a cold anger crystallizing in her chest. They thought they could scare her into backing down? They didn't know her at all. She drove toward her apartment, mind already working on next steps. The Meridian Consulting Group connection was new, something they obviously didn't want her to find. She'd need to dig deeper, but carefully. Very carefully. The SUV followed her all the way home, parking with a clear view of her building entrance. Ariana gathered her things, keeping her movements unhurried. Let them watch. Let them think they had her cowed and cornered. She had learned something vital today. The people behind this weren't just corrupt. They were powerful enough to command both local police and federal resources. That meant whatever she had stumbled onto was bigger than she'd initially suspected. Much bigger. Sunrise painted the sky in muted pinks and grays as Ariana checked her watch again. The whistleblowing teller, Marissa, had agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe across town at 7:30 a.m. before her shift started at the bank. After yesterday's surveillance, Ariana had spent hours planning the safest route, one that avoided main roads and traffic cameras. She grabbed her recorder and notebook, tucking them into her jacket pocket. The morning air was crisp as she walked to her car, scanning the street for the black SUV that had tailed her yesterday. The road looked clear, but that meant nothing. They could be using a different vehicle today. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marissa. "Still okay to meet?" "On my way," Ariana replied, starting her engine. She took side streets through residential neighborhoods, checking her mirrors constantly. The roads were mostly empty this early, just a few delivery trucks and early commuters. Perfect for spotting a tail, but also perfect for an ambush. After 15 minutes of careful driving, she turned onto Old Mill Road, a winding stretch that cut through dense woods. The guardrails were the only barrier between the asphalt and a steep embankment dropping toward the river below. Few people used this route anymore since the new highway opened, which was exactly why Ariana had chosen it. Halfway along the curved road, a deer darted out from the trees. Ariana's foot instinctively hit the brake pedal, and it sank straight to the floor with no resistance. Her heart lurched as the car continued to accelerate downhill. She pumped the pedal frantically, but it was completely dead. No pressure, no response. The speedometer crept past 60 centímeters as the road curved sharply right. No, no, no! Ariana yanked the emergency brake, but it did little to slow the car's momentum. She downshifted manually, trying to use engine braking, but the curve was coming up too fast. The guardrail rushed toward her as she fought to maintain control. Her tires screamed against the pavement as the car fish-tailed. The steering wheel jerked in her hands. The passenger side scraped the guardrail with a horrible metallic shriek. Through her driver's side window, she caught a glimpse of the drop-off beyond the barrier. easily 50 feet down to the rocks and water below. Just as her car started to slide sideways toward the edge, something massive slammed into her passenger side. The impact was deafening. Her seatbelt locked as she was thrown sideways, her head whipping around from the force of the collision. It was Ramsey's black SUV. He had T-boned her car deliberately, pushing it away from the guardrail and into the opposite lane. Both vehicles skidded to a stop, smoke rising from their tires. Ramsey was out of his SUV instantly, running to her door. "Ariana, can you move?" She nodded shakily, her hands trembling as she unbuckled her seatbelt. Ramsey yanked her door open and helped her out. Her legs felt like rubber. "The brakes," she managed. There was nothing." "I know." Ramsey's face was grim. "I've been following you since you left home. Saw the brake fluid on your driveway this morning. Knew they might try something like this." Ariana leaned against his SUV, her heart still racing. "You saved my life." "They're escalating." Ramsey crouched down to examine under her car. "Look at this. Brake lines completely severed. Clean cut, not wear and tear." The sound of approaching sirens cut through the morning air. Someone must have called 911 after hearing the crash. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up, followed by an ambulance. The first officers on scene barely glanced at the cut brake lines. Despite Ramsey identifying himself as a former federal agent and explaining his suspicions, they seemed determined to write it off as a mechanical failure. "These things happen with older vehicles," one officer said dismissively. "Probably just normal wear and tear." "Normal wear doesn't create perfectly straight cuts," Ariana argued, but they were already walking away, chatting and laughing among themselves. She pulled out her phone, carefully photographing the severed brake lines from multiple angles. The cuts were obvious, clean, and deliberate. She documented the skid marks on the road, the impact damage to both vehicles, and the steep drop beyond the guardrail. The paramedics insisted on checking her for injuries. Besides some bruising from the seatbelt and a slight headache, she was physically fine. The same couldn't be said for her car, which had a crushed passenger side and would need extensive repairs. Ramsey's SUV had also sustained heavy damage to its front end. He didn't seem to care, more concerned with gathering evidence before the tow trucks arrived. "This wasn't random," he said quietly, as the paramedics packed up their gear. "They knew your route, knew this would be the perfect spot. No witnesses, no cameras, and a convenient accident site that would explain everything." Ariana watched the officers chatting with the tow truck drivers, their body language casual and unconcerned. "And the local police are either in on it or being paid to look the other way?" "Classic hit attempt." Ramsey's voice was hard. "Make it look like an accident. If I hadn't been following you—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. A chill ran down Ariana's spine as she looked at the drop-off again. Without Ramsey's intervention, her car would have gone over that guardrail. They would have found her body in the river. Just another tragic accident victim. Ramsey put a hand on her shoulder, his expression deadly serious. "They're not just trying to intimidate you anymore. They're trying to erase you. You're next on their list, and they won't stop until you're gone." Ramsey's home office was a stark contrast to the chaos of the morning. Stacks of organized files covered his desk, and 3 computer monitors displayed different databases. The afternoon sun filtered through half-closed blinds, casting strips of light across the evidence they'd gathered. Ariana sat in an old leather chair, her hands still slightly shaking from the morning's attempt on her life. She focused on the financial records spread before her, trying to piece together the web of corruption that had nearly gotten her killed. "Look at this pattern," Ramsey said, pointing to a spreadsheet. "Every third Friday, exactly $50,000 moves from Willowbrook Bank through 7 different accounts before landing here." He tapped the screen, highlighting a company name, Summit Construction Partners. "I remember them. Ariana said, leaning forward. They were under investigation last year for bid rigging on government contracts. The case mysteriously disappeared. Right. Ramsey pulled up another document. But here's where it gets interesting. Summit makes regular donations to State Senator Morrison's campaign fund. And Morrison sits on the Police Oversight Committee, Ariana finished. She grabbed her notebook, adding another connection to her growing diagram. The same committee that blocked 3 separate investigations into police brutality last year. Ramsey nodded grimly. The money trail doesn't stop there. Look at these transfers from Morrison's private foundation. They spent the next hour tracking payments that bounced between shell companies before emerging as community outreach grants to the police union. Each transaction was carefully disguised, but the pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. It's a perfect circle, Ariana muttered, drawing lines between entries in her notes. The construction company gets inflated government contracts, kicks back money to Morrison, who funnels it to the police union. But why? What are they buying with all these payments? Protection, Ramsey said. Look at the dates of these transfers compared to incident reports. He pulled up a timeline he'd been building. Every major payment corresponds with a complaint being buried or evidence disappearing. Ariana's stomach tightened as she noticed another pattern. These federal oversight reports, they all pass through Daltrey's office before going to Justice Department review. She started cross-referencing dates, her hands moving faster as connections emerged. Here, 3 days before I was suspended, a payment of $75,000 went from Summit to a consulting firm owned by Daltrey's brother-in-law. The consulting firm that doesn't seem to do any actual consulting, Ramsey added. No employees, no office, just a P.O. box and a bank account. Ariana felt a chill as the bigger picture emerged. Daltrey's not just covering for corrupt cops. He's running the whole operation. The construction kickbacks, the political bribes, the police payoffs. It all flows through him. Which explains why he was so quick to suspend you, Ramsey said. You were getting too close to his personal piggy bank. They spent another hour documenting every connection, building a timeline that showed the growth of the corruption network. What had started as simple bid rigging had evolved into a sophisticated money laundering operation that bought police protection and political influence. We need someone inside the department, Ariana said, rubbing her tired eyes. Someone who can access the internal complaint records, prove the connection between these payments and buried cases. Naomi Beck, Ramsey suggested. Internal affairs investigator. She's been quietly documenting suspicious patterns in police behavior for months. And she's one of the few people in IA who hasn't been bought. Ariana nodded. She'd worked with Naomi before on a fraud case. The woman was meticulous and, more importantly, incorruptible. Can you arrange a meeting? Ramsey made a call, speaking in careful code. After a brief conversation, he turned back to Ariana. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. The old coffee shop on Pine Street. She'll bring what she has. They spent another hour organizing their evidence, making copies and storing everything in secure locations. Neither of them spoke about the morning's assassination attempt, but its shadow hung over their work. They both knew they were running out of time. As the sun began to set, Ariana gathered her notes. I should get home, try to get some sleep before meeting Naomi. Take my backup car, Ramsey said, tossing her a set of keys. It's not as obvious as the SUV, and I've checked it thoroughly. No one's had a chance to tamper with it. The drive home in Ramsey's old sedan was uneventful, but Ariana couldn't shake the feeling of exposure. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every passing car drew her attention. The weight of what they'd discovered pressed down on her. Not just corruption, but a sophisticated criminal enterprise run by one of the FBI's top officials. She parked in her building's garage, choosing a spot near the security camera. The elevator ride to her floor felt longer than usual. Her apartment was dark and quiet when she entered, exactly as she'd left it. She double-checked the locks, drew the blinds, and finally allowed herself to exhale. Exhaustion hit her all at once. The adrenaline crash from the morning's near-death experience, hours of intense investigation, and the growing weight of what they'd uncovered. She set her alarm for 5 a.m. and collapsed onto her bed, still fully dressed. Outside her building, in an unmarked car with tinted windows, a figure sat watching her darkened window, speaking quietly into a phone. The morning air was crisp and still dark when Ariana pulled Ramsey's sedan into the back lot of the Daily Grind Cafe. The small coffee shop hadn't opened yet, but a dim light glowed from the kitchen. She chose this location carefully. Family-owned, no security cameras, and the owner owed Ramsey a favor from years back. Ariana checked her surroundings before exiting the car. The street was empty except for a newspaper delivery truck rattling past. She walked to the rear entrance and knocked 3 times, pausing, then twice more. The pattern Ramsey had arranged. The door opened slightly, and Naomi Beck's face appeared. The internal affairs investigator looked as tired as Ariana felt, with dark circles under her eyes and her usually neat hair hastily pulled back. "Come in quickly," Naomi whispered, scanning the alley before closing and locking the door behind them. The cafe's kitchen was warm and smelled of fresh coffee. The owner had left them a pot brewing and then made himself scarce, another courtesy arranged by Ramsey. They settled at a small prep table in the corner, away from the windows. "I've been going through files all night," Naomi said, pulling out a laptop and several folders. "After you called, I started digging deeper into those 3 officers, Briggs, Lorne, and Tully. What I found—" She shook her head. "It's worse than we thought." Ariana poured them both coffee while Naomi opened the first folder. In the past 18 months, there have been 27 formal complaints filed against these 3 officers. Excessive force, illegal searches, intimidation. The pattern is clear. "And all dismissed?" Ariana asked, though she already knew the answer. "Every single one." Naomi spread out the complaint forms. "All rejected by the same review officer, Lieutenant James Packard. Look at the language he uses to dismiss them. Insufficient evidence. Complainant deemed unreliable. Officer actions within acceptable protocol." Ariana scanned the documents, her jaw tightening. These complaints aren't just from civilians. There are reports from other officers, shop owners, even a school principal. "Exactly." Naomi pulled up files on her laptop. "But here's where it gets interesting. I tracked Packard's finances. Every month, he receives a $5,000 consulting fee from a company called Civic Progress Partners. Let me guess, connected to Senator Morrison's donors?" Naomi nodded. "The company's owned by the same holding group that manages Summit Construction's real estate investments. But that's just the beginning." She opened another file. "I found a pattern of payments to various officers, all labeled as community outreach stipends or special duty compensation. They're coming from organizations that list Willowbrook Bank as their primary financial institution." Ariana started making notes, drawing connections. "How many officers are receiving these payments?" 37 that I've confirmed. All of them have either participated in questionable arrests or helped suppress investigations. The amounts vary, but they spike after specific incidents." Naomi pulled up a spreadsheet. "Like here, Officers Briggs and Lorne each received an extra $10,000 overtime bonus 3 days after they arrested a journalist who was investigating bank foreclosure practices. The timing matches the money flow we traced through Daltrey's network," Ariana said. She explained what she and Ramsey had discovered about the construction kickbacks and political payments. Naomi listened intently, occasionally adding details that filled in gaps in their timeline. "I always knew there was something wrong in the department," But this, she gestured at their accumulated evidence, this is systematic corruption at every level. They spent the next hour cross-referencing documents and copying files. Naomi had brought everything on an encrypted drive, carefully documenting the chain of evidence. She'd also included personnel files showing how officers who reported misconduct were systematically transferred, demoted, or pushed into early retirement. "What made you start investigating?" Ariana asked as they organized the files. Naomi's face hardened. "My partner tried to report Briggs last year for beating a handcuffed teenager. 2 days later, he was accused of evidence tampering. When he wouldn't back down, they planted drugs in his locker. He lost his badge, his pension, everything." She took a deep breath. "I've been gathering evidence ever since, waiting for someone I could trust." The sky was growing lighter outside. They needed to wrap up before the cafe's regular staff arrived. Ariana carefully packed the encrypted drive and most important documents into her briefcase. "You should get out of town for a few days," she told Naomi. "Once we move on this, they'll know where the internal files came from." "Already arranged," Naomi said. "I'm attending a training conference in Seattle. Flight leaves in 3 hours." She handed Ariana a sealed envelope. "One more thing. Copies of text messages between Packard and the bank manager the day you were arrested. They knew you were coming. They were waiting for you." Ramsey's words from their earlier conversation echoed in Ariana's mind. "We need to move fast. Take this straight to the U.S. Attorney's office. Don't give them time to bury it." She called Ramsey from the cafe's landline, safer than using her cell phone. He agreed to arrange an emergency meeting with the U.S. Attorney for the following morning. Everything was finally coming together. They left separately, using different exits. The morning commute was picking up, providing better cover. Ariana drove home using a winding route, watching for tails. Her mind was racing, organizing the presentation she would make to the U.S. Attorney. She had it all now. The money trail, the pattern of abuse, the internal cover-ups, and clear evidence of federal crimes. Back in her apartment, Ariana backed up all the files onto her secure drive and hid copies in multiple locations. She set her alarm for 5 a.m., early enough to review everything one final time before the meeting. For the first time since the assault in the bank, she felt a glimmer of hope. Justice was finally within reach. The pounding jolted Ariana from sleep. Heavy fists hammered her apartment door, each impact rattling the frame. Her bedside clock read 4:17 a.m. Through the fog of interrupted sleep, she heard a familiar voice that made her blood run cold. "Police! Open up now!" Officer Briggs bellowed from the hallway. Ariana scrambled out of bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes. She'd fallen asleep reviewing files for the morning meeting. Before she could reach her phone, the door burst inward with a thunderous crack. Wood splinters sprayed across her living room floor. Officers flooded into her apartment, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Briggs led the charge, followed by Lorne and Tully. 4 other officers she didn't recognize spread out behind them. "On the ground! Now!" Briggs screamed, his face twisted with rage. "This is my home," Ariana said, raising her hands. "I'm a federal." Briggs lunged forward, grabbing her shoulder and spinning her around. He slammed her face first into the wall. "You're not federal anything anymore." Pain exploded through her cheekbone. Lorne grabbed her arms, wrenching them behind her back, while Briggs kicked her legs out. She crashed to the floor, carpet burning against her face. "Ariana Holt," Briggs recited with obvious satisfaction. "You're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer." The zip ties bit into her wrists as Lorne cinched them brutally tight. Tully and another officer each grabbed one of her legs. "I want to see the warrant," Ariana demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. Briggs crouched beside her, waving a paper in front of her face. "Right here, sweetheart." All nice and legal. Even in the dim light, Ariana could tell the document was forged. The formatting was wrong, the signature illegible. They dragged her across the carpet, her body scraping over the rough fibers. The other officers were tearing through her apartment, pulling drawers open, dumping contents, seizing every electronic device they could find. "Where's the evidence, Ms. Fake Agent?" Tully taunted, stepping on her ankle as they hauled her past. Ariana's mind raced to her secure drive, tucked safely in her jacket pocket. She had to protect it. Everything depended on those files. They yanked her to her feet in the hallway. Neighbors were peeking out their doors, recording on phones. Briggs noticed and barked at them to get back inside. The walk to the police car became a gauntlet. Hidden from witnesses in the stairwell, Lorne slapped her hard across the face. Tully drove his knee into the back of her thigh, making her stumble. "Not so tough without your fake badge, are you?" Lorne sneered. They shoved her into the back of a cruiser. Through the window, she watched more officers carrying out boxes of her belongings. Her laptop, tablets, papers, everything that could contain evidence. The drive to the precinct was filled with mockery. Every bump in the road slammed her shoulders against the hard plastic seat. Her bound hands had gone numb. "Bet you thought you were really clever," Briggs called from the front seat. "Playing detective, making up lies about good officers. Now you're gonna learn what happens to people who cross the thin blue line." Inside the precinct, they marched her past the booking desk without processing. Instead, they took her to a back room with concrete floors and harsh fluorescent lighting. Water pooled in one corner where a pipe was leaking. "Kneel," Lorne ordered, shoving her shoulder. When she resisted, Tully kicked the back of her knees. She fell hard onto the wet concrete. Cold water soaked through her pants. "Empty her pockets," Briggs commanded. Rough hands patted her down, pulling everything out: her phone, keys, wallet. Ariana's heart stopped. The secure drive was gone. Somehow, during the arrest, during all the manhandling and dragging, someone had lifted it from her pocket. "Looking for something?" Briggs smirked, clearly enjoying her reaction. "Amazing how evidence just disappears, isn't it?" Hours crawled by. They left her kneeling in the water, hands still bound. Different officers came in periodically to mock her. They called her faker, wannabe, crazy lady. Someone poured more water on the floor. Another kicked her folder of papers into the growing puddle, ruining everything inside. Eventually, an internal affairs officer arrived. Not Naomi Beck, but a stern-faced man Ariana didn't recognize. He barely glanced at her before announcing the warrant had been verified as valid. "But that's impossible," Ariana protested. "It was clearly forged. Just look at the—" "Shut up," the IA officer snapped. "The warrant is valid. You'll be charged with impersonating a federal officer, interfering with an investigation, and resisting arrest." They finally moved her to a holding cell. The zip ties had left deep purple welts around her wrists. Her legs shook from hours of kneeling. Everything she'd gathered, every piece of evidence she'd so carefully documented, was gone. Ariana sank onto the thin mattress. The weight of defeat crushed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. They had won. The corrupt system she'd fought to expose had simply absorbed her attempts like a sponge soaking up water, then squeezed her dry. Her meeting with the U.S. attorney would pass without her. Naomi's evidence was lost. Ramsey wouldn't know what had happened to her. Even if she somehow beat these charges, the corruption would continue, protected by badges and bureaucracy and the blue wall of silence. In the harsh fluorescent lighting of the holding cell, Ariana collapsed onto her side, her body finally giving in to exhaustion and despair. For the first time since this nightmare began, she allowed herself to cry. Ramsey's weathered hands gripped the steering wheel as he guided his car through back streets, avoiding main roads where cameras might track them. Ariana sat silently in the passenger seat, her wrists still throbbing from the zip ties. Her clothes were damp and dirty from hours on the wet concrete floor. "You look terrible," Ramsey said softly, genuine concern in his voice. "They really worked you over, didn't they?" "They took everything," Ariana replied, her voice hoarse. "The evidence drive, my devices, my files. Even my backup documents are gone. That's why we have contingency plans." Ramsey turned down a narrow alley behind an old warehouse. "I've got a safe house nearby. Been maintaining it since my days tracking dirty cops in the 90s. He parked behind the building and led her through a service entrance. The space inside was sparse but clean. A few chairs, a table, some basic supplies. Most importantly, it had no windows and only one exit to watch. "First things first," Ramsey said, pulling out a first aid kit. "Let me look at those wrists." As he cleaned and bandaged the raw skin where the zip ties had cut in, Ramsey's expression darkened. "While they had you locked up, I made some calls. Called in favors from people who still owe me. What I found out," he shook his head, "it's bigger than we thought. Much bigger." Ariana watched his face carefully. In all their years working together, she'd never seen him this troubled. "Remember that shell corporation we traced? The one linking political donations to the police slush fund?" Ramsey pulled out a thick folder. "I had an old colleague in corporate records do some digging. The company was registered 30 years ago under the name Marcus Dalton." "Dalton?" Ariana frowned. "Not. Yes. Before he changed it to Daltrey. Your deputy director has been running this scheme for decades, since before he even joined the Bureau." Ramsey spread documents across the table. "Look at the pattern. Every major donor, every community partnership payment, every consulting fee to retired officers, it all flows back to accounts he controls." Ariana's hands trembled as she examined the papers. He orchestrated everything. The surveillance, the bank alert, the assault, my suspension, the attempted hit on your car, Ramsey added grimly, and tonight's arrest. "He's been watching you for months, probably since you first started looking into those suspicious transfers. When you got too close, he activated his network to destroy you." "But why?" Ariana demanded. "Why go to these lengths?" "Because you accidentally stumbled onto his personal corruption empire. He's spent 30 years building a system that lets him control both sides, the criminals and the cops. The money flows up, the protection flows down, and he sits at the top, making sure everyone stays in line." Ariana stood up, pacing the room as fury replaced her exhaustion. "He's supposed to fight corruption, not run it. He's everything that's wrong with the system." "And that's exactly why he's so dangerous," Ramsey warned. "He knows every trick, every procedure, every way to bury evidence and discredit witnesses. Going through official channels won't work. He owns too many people. Then we don't go through channels." Ariana stopped pacing, her mind racing. "We go public. All at once, too fast for him to stop it." She pulled out her backup phone, the one the officers hadn't found, and dialed a number she'd memorized years ago. "Who are you calling?" Ramsey asked. "Rhea Lawson. Remember that investigative piece she did on police brutality cover-ups last year? The one that got 3 commissioners fired?" A small smile crossed Ariana's face. "She owes me a favor." The phone rang twice before a sharp voice answered. "Lawson." "Rhea, it's Ariana Holt. I need your help exposing systemic corruption at the highest levels of the FBI and local law enforcement." There was a pause. "The FBI agent who got assaulted at Willowbrook Bank? It's all over social media." "That's me." "But the assault was just the beginning. I've got evidence of a decades-long corruption scheme run by Deputy Director Marcus Daltrey himself. Money laundering, political bribes, police protection rackets, All of it documented. Daltrey! Ria's voice sharpened with interest. He's untouchable. Everyone who's tried to investigate him has been destroyed. That's why we need to go big. Live broadcast, everything exposed at once, no time for him to spin it or bury it. Ariana looked at Ramsey, who nodded encouragingly. Can you be here in 30 minutes? Text me the address. I'll bring my research team's files on Daltrey. We've been collecting dirt on him for years, just couldn't prove the connection. After hanging up, Ariana made one more call, to Naomi Beck. I heard what happened, Naomi said immediately. That warrant was completely illegal. I've got proof they fabricated it. Bring everything you have. We're taking Daltrey down tonight. Within the hour, they were all gathered around the table in Ramsey's safe house. Ariana, still bruised but burning with determination. Ramsey, his experience and contacts proving invaluable. Naomi, with her internal affairs files and whistleblower statements. And Ria, whose team had been quietly documenting Daltrey's suspicious activities for years. Tomorrow evening, Ria said, spreading out a timeline. I've got a live segment scheduled, 10 minutes of primetime coverage. We hit them with everything at once. The assault video, the financial records, the forged warrant, witness statements, all of it. He'll try to stop the broadcast, Naomi warned. Let him try, Ramsey said grimly. The more he fights it, the guiltier he'll look. They worked late into the night, organizing evidence, planning the sequence of revelations, preparing for every possible counterattack. The table became covered with documents, photos, and diagrams showing the web of corruption they were about to expose. Once this airs, Ria said, there's no going back. Are you ready for what comes next? Ariana looked at each of her allies, her mentor, the whistleblower, the journalist. Together, they had the power to tear down what Daltrey had spent decades building. I've been ready since they first threw me to the ground, she said. Let's end this. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as night settled around Ramsey's safe house. Empty coffee cups littered the table where stacks of evidence grew higher by the hour. Naomi Beck sat cross-legged on the floor, her laptop balanced on her knees as she sorted through internal police emails. Look at this thread, she said, turning the screen toward Ariana. Daltrey specifically instructed the precinct captain to have officers ready at Willowbrook Bank that morning. He claimed it was for a potential robbery suspect, but the description he gave matches you exactly. Ariana leaned in, scanning the emails. Her jaw tightened as she read Daltrey's precise instructions about how to handle the situation. He planned every detail, right down to which officers would be there. Officers with multiple excessive force complaints, Naomi added, pulling up personnel files. All buried by the same review board members who receive consulting fees from Daltrey's shell companies. Across the room, Ramsey worked intently at his own computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. These encryption algorithms are good, but not good enough, he muttered. Almost got it. There. He sat back with satisfaction. Just recovered everything from your seized devices, Ariana. They tried to wipe them, but I had backup protocols in place. All my case files? Ariana moved to look over his shoulder. Every last document, including those transfer records you were investigating when this started. He pointed to a spreadsheet. See these transactions? They're coded to look like legitimate police equipment purchases, but the money actually flows through 3 different shell companies before landing in accounts controlled by Daltrey's aliases. Ria Lawson paced nearby, phone pressed to her ear as she coordinated with her production team. I need the satellite truck in position by 2 p.m. tomorrow. Yes, full broadcast capability. And make sure we have redundant feeds. She paused, listening, because someone might try to cut the primary signal. Trust me on this. She ended the call and joined the others at the table. Okay, Here's how we structure the reveal. She laid out a detailed timeline. We start with the bank assault footage. That's our hook, what people already know about. Then we expand outward, showing how it connects to the larger corruption network. Layer by layer, Ariana nodded. The forged warrant, the attempted hit on my car, the money trails. Exactly. Each revelation builds on the last. By the time we show Daltrey's direct involvement, the pattern will be undeniable. Rhea pulled out her camera. But first, we need your testimony on record. Every detail, from the beginning. Ariana took a deep breath and faced the camera. For the next hour, she methodically recounted everything. The initial assault, her suspension, the threats against her mother, the cut brake lines, the brutal arrest. Her voice remained steady, but her hands clenched tightly in her lap as she described the humiliation of being dragged across floors, mocked by officers, forced to kneel in water. "We need to get your mother somewhere safe," Ramsey said when she finished. "They might try to use her as leverage." "I already called my old partner in witness protection," Naomi said. "She's arranging a secure location right now. No paper trail, no digital records." Within the hour, Gloria was quietly moved to a friend's house 3 towns over, with strict instructions to contact no one and stay away from windows. Ariana hated asking her mother to hide, but the alternative was leaving her vulnerable to Daltrey's enforcers. Through the night, they meticulously verified every document, cross-referencing dates and names to ensure there were no contradictions that Daltrey could exploit. Rhea's team created multiple backups of all files, storing them across secure cloud servers that even the FBI couldn't easily access. "Tomorrow's press briefing is scheduled for 3 p.m., Rhea said, checking her notes. "Daltrey plans to publicly address the misconduct allegations against you. He'll try to paint you as unstable, probably claim you fabricated evidence. Instead, he'll be explaining himself to the whole country," Ariana replied. "Live and unfiltered. We'll cut into his feed right after he starts speaking," Rhea confirmed. "My team has already bypassed the studio's delay switch. Once we begin broadcasting, they can't stop it." Ramsey studied the building plans for the press venue. "I'll be in position here, watching for any attempt to shut down the satellite feeds. Naomi, you monitor police channels in case they try to interrupt the broadcast under some pretense." "I've got officers I trust on standby," Naomi added. "The moment we expose Daltrey's criminal network, they'll move to secure the evidence and prevent any last-minute document destruction." Around midnight, they did one final review of their timeline. The evidence was overwhelming. Hundreds of falsified reports, millions in laundered funds, dozens of buried complaints, and a clear pattern of systematic corruption orchestrated by Deputy Director Daltrey himself. "Get some rest," Ramsey advised as exhaustion began to show on their faces. "Tomorrow will be intense." They took turns sleeping in shifts, never leaving the safe house unguarded. Ariana lay on the small cot in the corner, her mind surprisingly calm despite everything at stake. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued her since the bank assault had transformed into iron resolve. She thought of her mother, hiding in darkness, of the officers who had humiliated her, of Daltrey, sitting in his office, believing himself untouchable. Tomorrow would change everything, not just for her, but for every person his corruption had harmed. The familiar weight of justice settled over her as she drifted into light sleep. No more running, no more hiding. When the sun rose, they would tear down 3 decades of corruption in less than 30 minutes of live television. Through the window, the night sky began to lighten imperceptibly. In a few hours, the truth would finally see daylight. The government auditorium buzzed with anticipation as reporters filled every seat. Camera flashes punctuated the murmurs of conversation, while technicians made final adjustments to the microphones on the podium. Deputy Director Marcus Daltrey stood off to the side, adjusting his tie with practiced confidence. He stepped to the podium exactly at 3 o'clock, his polished appearance designed to project authority and control. The room quieted as he cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice carrying that familiar note of practiced authority. "I'm here to address some deeply concerning allegations of misconduct within our bureau. Specifically, the actions of a former agent who has made various unfounded claims." The massive projection screen behind him suddenly flickered. Daltrey faltered mid-sentence as crystal-clear footage filled the display. Ariana being slammed into the bank's glass display, shards scattering across the marble floor. "What is this?" he demanded, turning to his staff. "Cut the feed!" But the video continued. The horrified gasps of the audience merged with the recorded screams from bank customers as officers dragged Ariana across the lobby. The footage was raw, unedited, showing every brutal moment in high definition. "I said cut it!" Daltrey shouted, but his technicians shook their heads helplessly. Their controls had been completely overridden. The screen split into multiple panels. While the assault footage continued playing, financial documents began appearing alongside it. Bank statements, transfer records, shell company registrations. Each bore Daltrey's signature or tied directly to his aliases. His face drained of color as ledgers appeared showing payments to specific officers, including those who had attacked Ariana. Dates, times, and amounts filled the screen in damning detail. "This is unauthorized," Daltrey started, but his voice was drowned out by crystal-clear audio recording. "The deputy director wants her stopped." Officer Briggs's voice filled the auditorium. "Whatever it takes. He says she's getting too close to the accounts." "What about the brake lines?" Tully's voice replied. "Make it look like an accident?" "That's the order from above. Just make sure there's no trace." Reporters leaped to their feet, smartphones raised high to capture every moment. The live stream viewer count skyrocketed as social media exploded with real-time reactions. Naomi Beck's official internal affairs statement appeared next, detailing years of systematic evidence suppression and witness intimidation. It was followed by time-stamped security footage showing Daltrey himself meeting with the corrupt officers late at night in parking garages, handing over envelopes. Daltrey grabbed his phone, frantically dialing. "Get me building security now. This is a breach." "The only breach here is your criminal conspiracy, Marcus." Ramsey's voice cut through the chaos as he emerged from the crowd, flanked by stern-faced federal marshals. He held up a warrant. "We have everything. The shell companies, the laundered donations, the ordered assaults, the attempted murder." The marshals moved forward methodically. Daltrey backed away from the podium, his carefully maintained facade cracking completely. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "I'm the deputy director of the federal—" "You're under arrest," Ramsey stated flatly, nodding to the marshals, "for conspiracy, corruption, attempted murder, and about 30 other federal crimes we've documented extensively." As handcuffs clicked around Daltrey's wrists, Ariana stepped into view from the side entrance. The room erupted again as reporters recognized her from the footage still playing above. She stood tall, bandages visible on her arms, but her gaze unwavering as she watched justice unfold. "You think this ends with me?" Daltrey snarled as the marshals moved him toward the exit. The system is being cleaned out as we speak," Naomi interrupted, emerging with her own team of internal affairs officers. "Every corrupt officer, every bought official, every compromised supervisor. We're pulling the whole network down today." More chaos erupted as additional arrests began simultaneously across the city. News alerts flashed on reporters' phones. The bank manager taken into custody. Officers Briggs, Lorne, and Tully led out of their precinct in handcuffs. The state senator's office being raided by federal agents. Television cameras swung between Daltrey's arrest and Ariana's calm presence. Reporters shouted questions, their voices overlapping. "Dr. Holt, did you know about the corruption when they attacked you? Deputy Director Daltrey, how long have you been running this operation? Was the assault meant to silence you? How many other agents were involved?" Daltrey's face had gone from pale to gray as the marshals escorted him past the front row of press. His carefully crafted world of influence and intimidation collapsed around him in real time, broadcast live across every major network. Rhea Lawson stepped up to the podium, her production team still controlling the screens above. "We have complete documentation packets for every member of the press. Full financial records, witness statements, internal communications, and surveillance footage spanning the last decade of this corruption network." The crowd surged forward, hands reaching for the evidence files being distributed. Cameras continued flashing as Daltrey was led through the main doors, his head bowed for the first time anyone could remember. Ariana stood quietly to the side, watching the man who had tried to destroy her reduced to what he truly was, just another criminal being led away in handcuffs. Reporters began gravitating toward her, microphones extended, hungry for her story. As news of Daltrey's arrest spread across the city like wildfire, law enforcement units mobilized with unprecedented speed. Unmarked vehicles converged on office buildings, private residences, and precinct houses. The corrupt empire was falling, and its collapse echoed through every corner of the city. At police union headquarters, federal agents swarmed the building. Union President Mike Thornton was led out in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage as officers seized boxes of financial records. His secretary frantically shredded documents until agents burst through her door, catching her mid-destruction. "Stop right there!" an agent commanded, securing the remaining papers. "That's evidence tampering. Add it to the charges." Across town, at Willowbrook Bank's executive offices, similar scenes played out. FBI teams methodically worked their way through each floor. Bank executives who had spent years laundering Daltrey's dirty money now sat handcuffed in their ergonomic chairs, watching helplessly as agents copied hard drives and filled evidence boxes. Carlton, the bank manager who had helped target Ariana, broke down sobbing when agents reached his office. "Daltrey said we had no choice," he blubbered. He controlled everything, the accounts, the police protection, all of it. At the 43rd Precinct, internal affairs officers moved with cold efficiency. Officers Briggs, Lorne, and Tully were caught in the break room, their usual arrogance crumbling as they were disarmed and cuffed. "This is a mistake," Briggs protested, struggling against the restraints. "We're cops. You can't do this to us." "You stopped being cops the moment you chose to be thugs for hire," Naomi Beck replied, personally supervising their arrest. She read them their rights with particular satisfaction. Lorne remained silent, his face ashen, while Tully began crying, begging for a deal. Other officers watched from behind drawn blinds as their colleagues were escorted out. The precinct's atmosphere was thick with tension and fear as more names were called, more badges confiscated. Outside Willowbrook Bank, crowds gathered as word spread. Local residents who had witnessed years of suspicious activity, who had felt powerless against the corruption, now raised their voices in demands for justice. They held signs reading, "No more corrupt cops," and "Justice for Dr. Holt." Community leaders organized an impromptu rally. Speakers shared stories of past intimidation, of suspicious bank practices, of police harassment that suddenly made sense in light of the day's revelations. News vans lined the street, cameras capturing the community's awakening. In her small living room, Gloria Holt sat transfixed before her television, tissues scattered around her as she watched the events unfold. Tears streamed down her face. Not from fear this time, but from profound relief. The nightmare was ending. Her daughter was safe. The truth had won. "That's my baby," she whispered proudly, as footage showed Ariana speaking to Department of Justice officials. "That's my strong girl." At the DOJ offices, Ariana worked methodically with federal prosecutors, piecing together the full scope of Daltrey's operation. Her suspension had already been officially reversed, her service record not just cleared, but commended. She detailed every encounter, every threatening interaction, every piece of evidence she had gathered. "The pattern goes back at least 12 years, she explained, spreading timeline documents across the conference table. Daltrey used the bank to launder political donations, which bought him protection from oversight. The corrupt officers served as his enforcers, intimidating anyone who got too curious." Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Chen nodded, taking detailed notes. "And the senator's office provided political cover when needed?" "Exactly. Campaign contributions bought silence and support. Everyone got paid, everyone stayed quiet, and the cycle continued." More officials joined the debriefing as the afternoon wore on. Representatives from multiple agencies, ones previously blocked by Daltrey's influence, now worked together, building an airtight case. The evidence was overwhelming. A senior DOJ official presented Ariana with settlement papers for both her and Gloria. "The department acknowledges the grave misconduct you endured," he said. "We want to make this right." The settlement figures were substantial, but Ariana cared more about the systemic changes being implemented. New oversight protocols, mandatory reporting requirements, independent review boards, real reforms that would help prevent future corruption. As evening approached, Ariana drove to the bank building, now surrounded by crime scene tape. The crowds had thinned, but their signs and banners remained, fluttering in the cool breeze. The building's imposing facade seemed smaller somehow, its power diminished. She stepped out of her car, breathing in the crisp air. The setting sun cast long shadows across the cracked marble steps where she had been assaulted just days ago. Evidence markers still dotted the lobby floor, visible through the glass doors. Television crews were packing up their equipment after a long day of broadcasting. A few reporters recognized her but respectfully kept their distance, sensing she needed this moment alone. The Willowbrook Community Bank sign above the entrance caught the last rays of sunlight, its polished letters now a symbol of exposed corruption rather than presumed respectability. Soon it would be taken down, the building repurposed to serve the community it had helped exploit. Ariana stood quietly, letting the evening breeze wash over her. Her bruises were healing, the physical pain fading. The emotional wounds would take longer, but they too would heal. She had faced the darkness within the system and emerged stronger, bringing truth to light. A small group of local residents noticed her presence and began applauding softly. The gentle sound carried across the plaza, a simple acknowledgement of courage and perseverance. Ariana nodded in grateful recognition, then turned her gaze back to the building where everything had started, breathing in the cool evening air. Several weeks later, the autumn sun illuminated the transformed facade of the former Willowbrook Bank. Gone were the imposing columns and sterile corporate signage. In their place, warm earth tones and welcoming glass doors invited the community inside. The new sign read, "Ariana Holt Community Justice Center," in dignified bronze letters. Inside, the renovation had erased every trace of the bank's oppressive atmosphere. The marble floors where Ariana had been dragged remained, but they'd been refinished with a softer, warmer tone. The teller windows had been converted into comfortable consultation spaces. The vault was now a secure document storage facility for case files and evidence. Crowds gathered outside, their excited chatter filling the morning air. News vans lined the street, cameras ready to capture the historic opening. Community members who had witnessed Ariana's assault now returned as proud supporters, wearing buttons that read, "Justice Prevails" and "Community Strong." Gloria Holt arrived first, elegantly dressed and beaming with pride. The past weeks had been healing for her. The settlement had allowed her to retire comfortably, but more importantly, she'd watched her daughter's vindication transform into lasting change. Ramsey Cole stood nearby, his usual reserved demeanor softened by satisfaction. He'd agreed to serve as a senior advisor to the center's oversight board, ensuring its mission stayed true to its founding principles. The former agent who had once felt defeated by corruption now helped guard against its return. Naomi Beck arrived in civilian clothes, having left Internal Affairs to join Ariana's National Anti-Corruption Task Force. The isolation she'd endured as a whistleblower had been replaced by purpose and solidarity. Other officers who'd once shunned her now sought her guidance on reporting misconduct. Rhea Lawson moved through the crowd, notebook in hand, but not as a reporter this time. She'd been invited to teach workshops on investigative techniques and public accountability. Her exposé had earned multiple journalism awards, but she considered the center's opening her real victory. At precisely 10 o'clock, Ariana's car pulled up. She emerged wearing a crisp blue suit, her FBI badge gleaming at her hip. The crowd's cheering swelled. Children waved handmade signs celebrating their community hero. Camera flashes sparked as Ariana hugged her mother tightly. Gloria wiped happy tears from her eyes, straightening Ariana's collar with maternal pride. "Look what you've built, baby," she whispered. Reporters surged forward, microphones extended. "Dr. Holt, how does it feel to see the bank transformed? What message do you have for others facing systemic corruption? Can you describe your journey from victim to victor?" Ariana raised her hand for quiet. The crowd stilled, eager to hear her speak. Her voice carried clearly across the plaza, strength and warmth in every word. "They tried to break me," she said simply. "They built me instead." The crowd erupted in applause. Ariana waited for it to settle before continuing. "This center represents more than just my story. It belongs to every person who's faced injustice and chosen to stand up. Every whistleblower who risked everything for truth. Every community member who refused to look away." She gestured to the building behind her. "Inside these walls, we'll provide free legal aid to those who can't afford it. We'll investigate corruption and abuse of power. We'll teach people their rights and how to defend them. Most importantly, we'll stand together against anyone who tries to use power to harm our community." The center's doors opened, revealing the transformed interior. Where cold marble and steel had once dominated, warm woods and comfortable seating created an inviting atmosphere. The walls displayed artwork from local artists, celebrating themes of justice and community strength. Ariana led the way inside, her footsteps sure and steady across the floor that had once been the scene of her humiliation. The space now hummed with purpose. Legal aides setting up their stations, community organizers arranging meeting spaces, technical staff checking the new computer systems. Gloria squeezed her daughter's hand as they passed the spot where the FBI badge had skidded across the floor. That moment of exposure had been transformed from weakness into strength, from vulnerability into power. The main lobby opened into an airy atrium where a stage had been set up for the opening ceremony. Rows of chairs filled quickly as community members filed in. Young law students who would volunteer at the center sat beside elderly residents who had witnessed decades of neighborhood struggles. Off-duty officers who had opposed corruption mingled with civil rights activists. Ramsey took his place near the stage, standing tall despite his years. Naomi and Rhea found their seats in the front row, both wearing expressions of quiet triumph. The atmosphere crackled with hope and determination. Local officials and community leaders took turns at the podium, each praising the center's mission and Ariana's courage. But the crowd's energy noticeably shifted when Ariana herself stepped onto the stage. As one, they rose to their feet, applause thundering through the space. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.